Trans rights are human rights.
What is the biggest right that you're fighting for today?
The right to live.
How do you not have the right to live right now?
Because people out there exist that want us gone, and they're
But
in
you're
the
here
government.
right now and you're not being attacked, you're not being targeted. You do have the right to exist. You are existing.
Trans rights are human rights.
Ask you guys a question.
We have another dump quote.
Can you explain to me what human rights don't you have? I mean, aren't you entitled to all human rights? I mean, what is it that you're asking for? Because no one has ever answered what human rights don't you have. Hey, saying we want sex-based rights for biological trans rights. You're a female. I don't know who you are. And you're
They're horribly impolite. They really should be more careful, Dr. Orwell. If they were to do something impolite to me, like, for example, call me by the wrong name, I would have to do something impolite to them, like, for example, tear their hair out with my bare hand.
What exactly do we owe our fellow man? This is a question mankind has been pondering for generations. One of the most recent philosophers to tackle the question, T.M. Scanlon, offers a solution that most would agree upon. In his book, What We Owe to Each Other, he argues that our obligations are to other people in general. The idea is that actions are wrong if a principle that permits the action couldn't be justified to the affected people in the right way. In other words, the golden rule. Treat others like you want to be treated. This idea is one of the core messages of The Good Place, which named an episode after his book and explored his philosophy, amongst others. Despite being a concept that most would agree is generally positive, it is hard, if not impossible, to find a perfect example of this philosophy enacted in real life. The convoluted mess of biases, the relationships between various and often overlapping oppressors and oppressed classes, as well as the reality of many people centering their own happiness and benefits over all others, makes this philosophy quite hard to enact in person, even if you agree in theory. Of course, it doesn't help that what specifically we owe to each other consists of is constantly up for debate. Is food a basic human right? Is religious freedom a basic human right, even if that religion is harmful to an individual or society as a whole? In context with the trans rights movement, this question is especially prevalent as the group paints themselves as a minority group just establishing their claim on the world, while others disagree at what they claim they need in the name of equality. So, what exactly do we owe to trans people? As a fact of being human, trans people are owed basic respect and dignity. This is why I do not use slurs and try to avoid commenting maliciously or unnecessarily on their appearances. Regardless of how much a person annoys you, how much you may disagree with them, to me, resorting to name-calling proves that you've already lost the argument and pivoted to personal attacks. While I hold this line, those who consider themselves trans activists or allies have no such reservations, and love to call those who offer criticism Nazis, TERFs, bitches, and cunts, or else love to pull out rape threats.
I dare you to try and stop me from going into a women's bathroom. It will be the last mistake you ever make.
In his video, the activist also encouraged other transgender people to buy guns.
Go out, buy a gun. Learn how to use it.
Tara J published his video after the murder of 6 people at a Nashville Christian school and sparked anger online, which led to the removal of the video. The activist later responded to the criticism by saying he would continue to use women's restrooms and women's locker rooms.
I don't give a f if I lose this account. Report it all you want.
It is always the people on the left inciting violence. Genuinely, it is. I can't recall one person in regards to this issue on the right who has incited violence. Yet I've seen emails from professors. I've gotten so many death threats and inciting or threatening messages warning me not to come here or else my life would be in danger. And of course, they're all from people on the left. People will say Michael Knowles he incited violence and he called for the eradication of all trans individuals. He said from his own mouth that's not what he's calling for. He's not denying that trans individuals exist. He's not denying that every human deserves their God-given rights. And so people, again, that's just reading the headlines and running with it. But in my experience this past year, like I said, it has been the left who is the extreme, radical end of the bell curve here.
As a result of disagreeing with trans ideology, or even at times a specific trans person, many have been threatened, bullied, called foul names, doxxed, and arrested, and this is always painted as righteous and justified. Basic dignity also includes no mistreatment on account of transgender identification, by the definition everyone else uses for mistreatment, not the one that they have created.
You're just a bigot, you can go.
Oh, what makes me a bigot, ma'am? Or sir? I'm not sure. I didn't misgender you, did I?
Oh, please, go fuck yourself.
Oh, that's not very ladylike.
Oh, now you're fucking misgendering me. Ladylike.
Oh, well, what are you exactly?
None of your fucking business. What are you?
But you said I misgendered you. If I don't know what you are, how can I not misgender you?
By this, I mean that being acknowledged as your biological sex is not mistreatment. Not being allowed to enter opposite sex spaces is not mistreatment. Not being allowed entry to sex-specific sports, colleges, or scholarships is not mistreatment. Trans people should not face undue discrimination in regards to employment, healthcare, and housing, which does not mean allowing men to enter women's spaces, such as women's shelters, rape counseling positions, or ignoring the request of women to have female-only healthcare professionals treat them.
I don't see how that's relevant that I have not been a victim of it, or understand because I'm not a woman. If there is a group being marginalised, excluded, it makes no difference if I am saying that you are wrong. Absolutely none. Because you can't deny the fact. These are the facts that bear a place, exclude anyone who isn't part of the binary system. It's the reality that bear its place, exclude trans women and non-binary people. And when it comes to rape crisis services in Scotland, trans women who have been offered it have done so for 15 years. There's not been a single incident of anyone, like a cis male, abusing this. So you carry on insinuating or suggesting, like many have, that I'm a misogynist because I'm talking about women's spaces. When I'm not, I'm talking about the fact that a marginalised group is being excluded. Keep calling me a misogynist because the facts are showing very clearly why people like you are called TERFs.
The safety and comfort of women is not a reasonable sacrifice for the validation and comfort of others, especially in the light of the nature of sex crimes, which are primarily conducted by men against women. An estimated 91% of victims of rape and sexual assault are female, and nearly 99% of perpetrators are male. And this pattern of criminality is evidently retained in those who transition, as the majority of trans women in prison are there for sex crimes, according to a study from 2020 where it was found that 58.9% of trans women are imprisoned for sex crimes, in comparison to 3.3% of women and 16.8% of men. In other words, we do not owe trans people access to our bathrooms, our sports, our academics, or our bedrooms.
This is a great comment. And the cotton ceiling, the pressure put on lesbians to be sexually involved with trans women, is coercive, controlling, and disgusting. Coercion and control, lest we forget, this is also abuse and assault. The journalist Joe Bartosh, posted the Ministry of Justice UK crime stats. It's the proportion of male to female offenders prosecuted in 2021. Pause and zoom in. Sexual offenses, male to female, 98% male. And what is the biggest predictor of crime? And that would be sex. Cotton ceiling. Trans male to female people to present lesbians' lack of attraction to them as prejudice, and often it is used to shame them into relationships. All women are 100% a target with this group.
Validating a person's identity is not a requirement of treating a person with respect. Refusing to call a man who identifies as King George V as Your Highness is not denying him his right to dignity. It is an acknowledgement of reality, which could easily be important if he decided to rush for the throne and try to call himself the current ruler of England. Requiring someone to place your perception of reality over their own is not a fact of dignity but a sign of subservience, often to a specific person, but also to a religion not everyone believes in.
It has been a decade since my sex reassignment surgery.
I had my SRS 10 years ago.
It's been almost 4 years since I had the first stage of my vaginoplasty.
I had my second SRS revision surgery.
I am getting a second surgery.
After my surgery, I was just in such a dark place that I didn't really want to talk about it. I didn't really want to have to go back into it and feel all those feelings over again.
I had a few complications, bleedings, infections.
I've had complications and I've had a hard time.
I did have some complications and I did have some, concerns that not everybody deals with.
Trans people also deserve the same quality of healthcare as everyone else, meaning that they should receive adequate and equal healthcare that prioritizes their quality of life and safety. While I personally disagree with the choice of transition ever due to an inefficacy of resolving dysphoria or comorbid conditions, the lack of informed consent about the results and side effects of these surgeries, and for using physical permanent surgeries to treat mental distress, I do think that trans people deserve the autonomy to choose cosmetic surgery or hormone usage, given that they receive informed consent, are capable of giving it, and that their doctors give due diligence to treat their dysphoria without the ulterior motive of funneling them into expensive and lifelong surgeries.
I thought it would make me happier, and initially it did. Was that worth the constant issues I've had? The dilation I have to do for the rest of my life?
I'm having the worst time with dilation.
I was experiencing a little bit of dehiscence, which is basically when you are so swollen that the sutures that they put start to rip open. It was as bad as it sounds.
I had trouble urinating. I kind of walked around with it for a year before I sought help.
The reason I'm dilating twice a day is because if I miss once, it is so painful. I dread it so much because it's so painful.
I went to dilate again that night and I think that I moved a stitch. I don't know what happened, but something happened and I was in excruciating pain. It felt like literally somebody had shot me or stabbed me or burned me or something down there.
I had to dilate and I had to try to open my urethra up and it was just like, yeah, I'm going to start crying.
I was bleeding every time. I literally was going to pass out. I threw up because I had so much pain.
People get plastic surgery all the time, but are required to know the risk of death from getting a BBL, what the recovery will look like, and the final outcome. They are then able to weigh the risk accurately before getting one, or as accurately as an inherently coercive system will allow. The current system of healthcare for gender dysphoria does not allow this. Partly, this is due to a widespread belief that lying to medical professionals to get what you want is sound and solid advice, but also because those same medical professionals prefer surgery and hormones as a treatment rather than counseling, and often lie, leave out information, and don't give due diligence when prescribing treatment.
Breaking news, a trans activist is causing chaos after saying this.
If you don't have gender dysphoria, just lie about it.
That's right, you heard this activist correct. They're telling people on TikTok to just lie about having gender dysphoria in order to get cross-sex hormones. And this is having people lose their minds. And even other trans activists are saying that this person is giving them a bad name and giving their activism a huge problem, because now it just seems like they're giving in to what everyone has been saying all along, that it's just in their heads and they're lying about it. This is some of the worst advice I've ever seen. They're saying that even if you don't have gender dysphoria, to go and lie to a doctor, go lie to someone so you can receive medication that you don't even need because you don't have the dysphoria. In what plane, in what existence does you lying about how you feel, does you lying help your cause at all? If anything, this message is just going to lead to more transphobia, because you're literally telling people to say they have it even if they don't have it. And a lot of people will look up to this activist. Children look up to this activist, and they're hearing these words, and unfortunately some of them are probably going to go to their doctor, lie to them, and get these hormones and mess up their bodies because they don't even have dysphoria in the first place.
Take, for example, the effects of transitioning on women. As a result of hysterectomy or Lupron use, women face a higher risk of osteoporosis. Hysterectomy causes a higher risk of dementia. Testosterone also causes uterine and vaginal atrophy, which is rarely talked about and yet is a medical certainty. 28 studies on the long-term outcomes of medical transition have shown a higher rates of suicide, alcoholism, disability, and unchanged or worse mental health.
I remember bawling my eyes out saying what did I do? What did I do to myself? I fucked myself up. I'm never gonna heal from this.
My body is constantly trying to heal after surgery, since it considers it to be an open wound.
I mean, what can I do except go and have another revision?
I remember starting to cry in the surgeon's office because I was I'm depressed, I'm in school, it's painful, it's a lot.
The issues I had very early on should have been indications to me that I should not have done this, but I hated my male self so much that I needed to. And now there is no way to go back.
You can never go back.
When you get a surgery, it's not always gonna go well.
If I had known about the irreversible physical damage I caused to my body, then I would have never done any of this.
It's very much a commitment for life. You're going to have to rely on doctors for the rest of your life.
Don't be like me and deny problems until it's too late. Rather, address them so you can be happier and live a healthier life.
Men who undergo SRS find their promised neovaginas to be nothing like the organ it was modeled after. Neovaginas can grow hair inside the organ and require dilation to prevent the wound from closing. If kept open, neovaginas made with intestines will smell like intestines. No genital surgery is especially convincing, and all have high complication rates. Both trans men and women are sold the lie that their genitals will look exactly like the opposite sexes, and they are not warned of the pain and brutal recovery that comes with these surgeries. However, this right to make a potentially self-harming choice should not extend to children, as children cannot give informed consent for cosmetic surgeries given a lack of prefrontal development and the irreversible nature of so-called gender-affirming care. For example, puberty blockers have been sold to parents and teens as a way of harmlessly halting puberty to ensure that the child goes through the correct puberty for their identity. It is seen as the safer and easier way to deal with being trans, as this way one won't have to correct the puberty they went through to mimic that of the sex they wish to be. The primary drug used is Lupron, though it is used off-label. Lupron has been used for everything from endometriosis to prostate cancer to precocious puberty, and it does almost nothing its prescribers promise. The main effect of Lupron is to eliminate the production of estradiol. An estradiol deficiency creates misshapen and dysfunctional cells all throughout the body, which can lead to symptoms like chronic fatigue, muscle wasting, autonomic system dysfunction, which affects blood pressure, temperature control, digestion, bladder function, and sexual function, derangement of mood and perception, immune dysfunction, hyperinflammation, cardiac issues, as well as severe osteoporosis and arthritis. Perhaps most shocking is the link between Lupron and lower IQ, among other mental health problems.
This may upset some of you, but there are more and more studies coming out that prove puberty blockers are not in fact reversible. Obviously, some people are thinking this is a great way to cope with kids having anxiety going through puberty and being uncomfortable in their bodies. But the reality is that puberty blockers suppress estrogen and testosterone, which are hormones that help develop the reproductive system, but also affect the bones, the brain, and other parts of the body. Some doctors are claiming that children will simply snap back and regain their bone strength once they stop the blockers, but evidence is suggesting that many do not fully rebound and lag behind their peers. Unfortunately, this is something a lot of people are going to have to learn the hard way. The professionals don't know everything. Sometimes they're misinformed. There's such a thing as malpractice. They misdiagnose. It happens. Teaching kids to cope with their own discomfort in their bodies by changing everything is not healthy. This is chemical castration. It's a crime. This is the lobotomy of our generation.
Recent findings that GnRHAS, one of the ingredients in Lupron, increases depression symptoms and shows that it slows the reaction time in healthy women and reduces long-term spatial memory. It was also found that girls who took Lupron had a mean IQ of 94 as against a mean IQ of 102 for the matched control group. Those who transition young often find themselves faced with the consequences of making a choice that children simply are incapable of comprehending. This may be compounded by the mental health issues that many trans people face, including depression, which can make it difficult to conceptualize the future. How can a 14-year-old consider the consequences of hormones when their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed? When their limbic system prevents them from having adequate impulse control, or considering how their current choices would affect them in the future? And that's, of course, under the implication that these trans kids are actually in charge of their own transition. Trans people are not owed unfettered access to hormones, surgeries, or other permanent procedures without oversight, just as those with anorexia, high weights, or comorbid conditions cannot just decide to get cosmetic surgery against a doctor's orders. Trans people are not owed the medical industry's compliance with their desires just because they think that they know best, and the same goes for children and teens, which is often one of the largest debates, as access to surgery and hormones are often portrayed as a requisite to prevent suicide. Another central debate revolves around access to bathrooms.
Several weeks ago, in a vote to allow trans students to use whatever bathroom they wish, you assured us that these policies were perfectly safe, as neither yourself nor law enforcement could provide a single example of any trans student assaulting any girl in any bathroom, in any school, in any state, anywhere at all, in fact. But not to worry, since you couldn't locate them, I took the trouble to. See, Loudoun County, Virginia, where last year, under district policy, a trans student was allowed into the women's bathroom where he assaulted a girl. To cover it up, they moved him to another school where he did it again. See Irvine, California last month, where a trans student entered the women's locker room and flashed the girls there. When they confronted him, he mercilessly beat them. This happened again in Gwinnett County, Georgia. This happened again in Oklahoma City. This happened again in Ohio, where a trans man was allowed to use the locker room where he was arrested for flashing little girls. The judge dropped the charges after he ruled that this man was too fat for them to see anything. Last month, in this city, a man using they-them pronouns in a scene straight out of Silence of the Lambs hunted down and killed a female jogger because he, quote, wanted to look just like her. And before you say that these are anecdotal evidence, just note that in a survey of trans inmates in federal prisons, half were convicted of sexual assault and 90% were convicted of violent crimes, well above the general prison population. Now, it should also be noted that in each of these cases, each of these perpetrators had either changed their pronouns, had undergone transition, or had received gender-affirming therapy and accommodations thereof. Why is this important to note? Probably for the same reason we recognize as a society that you do not affirm that people with anorexia can be healthy in any way. You do not affirm that somebody with schizophrenia is hearing voices. And you do not affirm that somebody in a manic episode is having great ideas. Because when you leave somebody to languish in their false mental state, i.e. men who think they are women, they will inevitably lash out and harm themselves and those around them. People hurt other people. But I don't want to pretend and have the hubris to think that I'm going to be the one to change your mind. I'm happy to share any and all of these examples with you. But you will most likely leave here tonight believing that men can become women, affirming care works, and that you made the right vote. But you will no longer be able to look into the eyes of your constituents and honestly say that you are unaware of the assaults that inevitably take place when we declare to women, you have no right to privacy. Thank you very much.
Trans people do deserve access to bathrooms, which make them comfortable and which offers a sense of safety, without removing female bathrooms or encroaching into female bathrooms. A third bathroom for gender-neutral use is a great alternative, and yet, when offered, it tends to be deemed not enough, or comes at the cost of converting a female bathroom. Trans people are not owed access to single-sex spaces they do not belong to, as it erodes the privacy and safety of those within. Arguments that some people really do just want to pee are irrelevant, because if that were the case, Why are third bathrooms so unsatisfactory as solutions? Why is it needed to have access to the private spaces of women to feel safe? How is one supposed to tell the difference between a trans-identified male who just wants to pee and one who means objective harm? Unisex changing rooms are more dangerous for women and girls than single-sex facilities, as almost 90% of reported sexual assaults, harassment, and voyeurism in swimming pool and sports center changing rooms happen in unisex facilities, which make up less than half the total. This is a well-established fact, so well known that the 19th century laws mandating sex separation in factories were among the earliest anti-sexual harassment laws in the nation. The need for single-sex toilets is well known and well supported by years of evidence and a myriad of statistics. Similarly to how the trans bathroom debate ignores the potential harm that can and will come if women are forced to share bathrooms with men, there exists a danger to allowing men to play sports with women simply because they identify as such.
Fox delivering the knees, and that's it. Fallon Fox. Holy cow. Game over. Wow. And a quick finish to our first women's $20,000 championship tournament fight. The winner, win that battle, Helen Quilts.
How you feeling right now? I'm feeling excellent. That was sweet, huh? Did you like that? Yeah! And I want to tell everyone else, I'm coming in this tournament. Every woman in this tournament better look out. I'm freaking coming.
Trans people do deserve to play sports, but not on teams of the sex they don't belong to, where they would hold either a severe disadvantage as a trans man playing against men, or a severe advantage in a field already extremely difficult to monetize or be rewarded for as a trans woman playing against women. Sex differences exist, and even when using hormones does not negate or make up for all differences. Men are taller and larger than women, with wider shoulders, narrower hips, bigger muscles, bigger hearts and lungs, and stronger bones. Men have 41% more non-fat body mass, 50% more muscle mass in their legs, and 75% more muscle mass in their arms, as well as legs which are 65% stronger, and an upper body which is 90% stronger than the average woman. Allowing men to compete with women is unfair and physically dangerous to female athletes. That few, if any, trans-identified females compete with men is further proof of this understanding that, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be applied to women's sports. What we owe trans people are the same rights that everyone else has. Many of the so-called rights they claim are not rights at all, despite being presented as such.
Show me a case where a trans man assaulted and raped another man in the men's restroom, because I can show you about 50 where a trans woman assaulted and raped a woman in the women's restroom, or a child. Show me one case where a trans man assaulted and raped another man in jail, because I can show you about 20 where a trans woman assaulted and raped another woman in jail. I don't even see trans men living up to misogynistic stereotypes, but I always see trans women pushing and enforcing misogynistic stereotypes of what it means to be a woman, like looking like a sex doll. Trans women biological men are dominating women's sports when they compete, because they have a biological advantage, taking away scholarships and opportunities from women. Show me a video where a trans man is threatening violence against other men if they're not allowed in restrooms. Show me one video. If you believe that gender and sex are different, therefore you can change your gender, some spaces were created over biological differences, not just over social understandings. But if gender is just a social construct, then why are you forcing your way into women's spaces, actually putting women in danger?
Rights advocated by trans people, such as the ability to modify legal documents to align with their gender identity, or the expectation for others to adjust their speech, are not inherent human rights any more than a child's claim of a right to ice cream. Many demands from transgender activists infringe upon established human rights, such as freedom of speech or the need for sex segregation. It is not denying a right to female spaces to tell a trans-identified male that he can't come to the women's bathroom, because that was never a right he had to begin with, unlike women's rights to a sex-separated bathroom. Quite simply, I can support the safety, happiness, and dignity of trans people while still criticizing their ideology and the resulting erosion of women's rights. Most people, even those who dislike trans people for being gender nonconforming or weird or just genuinely hate them, are not asking for rights to employment, to have housing, or to not be discriminated against for legitimate reasons to be taken away. The issue is a disagreement on what rights are, and often what trans activists claim as rights are nothing more than rabid claims at anything that hits their fancy. Like a child arguing that they have a right to get a new toy, or a right to stay up past bedtime. And nothing I've said has been hateful or cruel or even incorrect. All of my stances come from intense research and lived experience, and yet I can almost assure you that any trans rights activists that stumble onto this video will consider me bigoted and hateful for recognizing that trans women are male and trans men are female. That trans rights are not rights at all, but tend instead to be privileges that rely on imposing on women's rights, and will believe that not partaking in their religion means that I see them as subhuman. It is what it is, because to that, I only have one thing to say. I don't hate you, even though you might hate me. This, dear viewers, is where we part. Doing the script for this video, I realized I've covered some of these topics so many times and in such depth that, and they're buried in there. They're like videos from like last year. Like, they're good videos, but I end up getting comments sometimes where it's, you can, like, they didn't even watch the video, it's just turf die. You suck a dick. Like, just the childish insults. And it's on stuff like the review from Manhunt, where the whole book is both poorly written and obvious rape fantasies. And they're willing to defend that. They think it's a right for them to defend that. They have a right to talk to me that way. And the thing is, I don't have a right for everyone to be nice to me. But I can't sue you for saying that you want to come into my house and hurt me. Even though in some countries you can sue me for saying that you're male, even though you identify as female. And so I think it's interesting because the debate's not really about what rights the trans people have. It's what are rights to begin with. What do you have a right to claim? Because all people in the US or in the UK or whatever have a certain specific type of rights that are just universal. And to a certain extent, we have to adjust them for stuff like the fact that sexism exists or disability. But in this case, a lot of what they're claiming is an required adjustment is just an overreach. It's being a tyrant. And I just find that very interesting that no one wants to confront that. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.